I'm Dr. Theresa Burke, and I am the founding director of Rachel's Vineyard Ministries, which provides weekend retreats for healing after abortion. And with me is my friend and colleague, Dr. David Reardon. He's the founding director of the Elliott Institute. In today's show, we're going to be looking at, in more detail, why women have abortions and what we can do as individuals and members of the church to reach out to them with the love and mercy of Jesus Christ. David, there's been a lot of research that you've done. In fact, you're the nation's leading expert in research after abortion. And how many people are affected by post-abortion reactions that you've learned about?
Well, I think it's obviously a controversial area, and any study is going to be called in question as to what the actual percentages are. We know that women have problems. I often like to respond with a quote from Dr. Julius Vogel, who was a psychiatrist and also an obstetrician who performed 20,000 abortions himself. So this isn't a pro-life zealot, right? But he said that, let me quote, "Every woman has a trauma at destroying a pregnancy. This is a part of her own life. When she destroys a pregnancy, she destroys a part of herself. A psychological price is paid. I know that as a psychiatrist." Now here's a guy who knows that every woman, he says, is traumatized on some level. He went on to describe it could be a hardening of maternal instinct, it could be depression, it could be withdrawal from others, but some psychological price is paid because you're destroying a life force, if nothing else. You could argue about, he would argue whether or not it's a person or not, I suppose, but it's a life. Something's growing there. And so he said every woman pays a price. I think it's very clear, all the research, even from the most zealous of the pro-choice researchers, indicates that 20% or more of women have an abortion with whatever time frame they look at, have some severe psychological response to it. And the problem with those studies is they only look over short time periods, and as you know, it can be often delayed, right?
Right.
What in your how often, when do people come in?
There's a very large continuum of reactions, and some women are affected immediately, right after the procedure, and other women, there's a delayed onset, 15, 20, 30, 40 years sometimes.
Right. Depends on the individual's coping mechanisms.
That's right.
And some will very successfully push it down and not think about it. They really can go on and not think about it. It doesn't bother them for years until some later event triggers it, maybe birth of another child or difficulty getting pregnant or the death of a loved one. We have a great story in Forbidden Grief about the woman who was triggered by the death of her dog.
That's right. Her dog dies, and that experience with death, and the same thing can happen when a parent dies or someone close to you or another child, and then all the memories and feelings and emotions related to a past abortion surface, and they've got to be dealt with. And that can be a really devastating, scary time, because most women don't know that people have problems after abortion.
Right, well, they're confused because I shouldn't be feeling this way. They're told the normal reaction is to feel relief.
Right.
And when you feel guilt and other things, you feel like, well, what's wrong with me that I'm not just feeling this relief? The Los Angeles Times did a poll, national survey of women and men, and they asked in their poll about abortion attitudes, have you ever had an abortion, is one of the later questions. And it was interesting because they only had like 10% of the women admitting having a past abortion. So most women who had abortions wouldn't even admit it in an anonymous poll. But of those who admitted having abortions, over half of the women and 2/3 of the men, more the men even than women, admitted that they had guilt about the experience.
That's very significant.
Right.
For men and women.
Yeah. And then I think it was 1/3 described it as murder. They described their own abortions as murder. And over 70% believed it was immoral. So they believe it's immoral. So again, you see a deep sense of regret, guilt, moral conflict over these past abortions in this random poll. And I think that's pretty indicative of the general population.
With so many people harboring so much unresolved guilt and grief and sadness, it's no wonder abortion's the most controversial topic of our age.
Yeah, I think you have to remember, it's not just these women, okay? It's the men involved. There's the grandparents of the child aborted, or
the roommate
parents,
who pays for it,
a roommate, a counselor, other people who would advise for it. So basically you have a whole population where, I think very literally, every family is touched by abortion. Maybe not immediately within that family, but certainly at the level of a cousin or you know, close relative or neighbor nearby. Everybody's touched by someone who has abortion. A lot of men don't know anybody who's had abortion. Most women, you'd
Right.
probably agree, no, because women tend to admit that more.
Not always.
Well, not always,
Yeah.
but I mean,